I grew up in Australia. I wanted to study acting, and I went to university for that because I really believe that we lack, as Muslims, we lack storytelling in cinema and television about our rich history. And so that's one thing that I really wanted to get. It was my main objective of getting into television and cinema, because there's absolutely, if you can count how many TV shows there are out there, explaining our history, that you can only say about 2 or 3, I would imagine, because we don't really produce anything. Is that right? You guys, you following me? Yeah. So I got into cinema, and it was kind of like a mistake, because I had no Muslim friends in there. It's really dangerous, because I didn't have a mentor, like a Muslim mentor, and it's a dangerous sector to get into. However, I ended up going to Hollywood. I did a couple of films in Hollywood. I did a couple of TV shows. And then finally, when I was 28 years old, I was like, I need to get married, because I really need to protect myself, because females in Hollywood are everywhere, and it's not turning out right for me. So I went to Bosnia, where my father is from, and I found a wife there. I got married, and I was going backwards and forwards between Hollywood and Bosnia, and I got married, and then I ended up staying in Bosnia. And I was trying to figure out how I could make halal cinema or halal content about Muslims. And it's very hard to do that by myself. So I ended up going to Turkey, and where I found that under Recep Tayyip Erdoğan. You guys know about Recep Tayyip Erdoğan? You know, he's the president of Turkey. Okay. So under him, the national television started to make pretty much Islamic content, which I was quite after that. And they were making like a Sherlock Holmes, an Ottoman Sherlock Holmes, so like a Muslim Sherlock Holmes, going around and solving all these mysteries about all these Jahil people and stuff like that. So it was really a really good thing. And I acted on that show for about 7 episodes. And then I went and learnt Turkish, by the way. I didn't know a word of Turkish when I arrived in Turkey. It took me a good year of studying intensive classes on learning Turkish. And I didn't believe I could learn it, but alhamdulillah, I learnt it in about a year and a half. And then I got an offer to go onto this TV show. It was about Ertugrul Ghazi. And I had a meeting with the producer. And the producer came to me. This is just to explain the sector there in Turkey. The producer asked me. He was like, on our first meeting, he asked me. He looked at me kind of weird, like untrustworthy sort of thing. And he was like, "This is about Ertugrul Ghazi." And I was like, "Okay, great." And I started explaining him all the history, what I knew about Ertugrul Ghazi. So I know a bit, and because I love my history. So, and he was surprised. He was like, Allahu Akbar. He couldn't believe it, And then he asked me, "Am I okay with playing on with acting in such a series?" I was like, "Absolutely, of course I am, mate. It's my kind of thing." Because majority of the actors in Turkey, they have a problem with that like going into that kind of content. They don't want to be known for that kind of stuff. So that's the actual situation of Turkey. But alhamdulillah, I got the privilege to act in that show. I was originally supposed to be a baddie that was going to just kill everyone, and it was really hard for me, because I would walk into a shop in Turkey and they'd be playing the show or something, and like people that knew the show in Turkey. It's really the practicing Muslims that watch this show in Turkey. So when I walk into a shop, they look at me and they'll be like, I'd be like on the show, I'd be like trying to kill Ibn Arabiya, and these guys and the shopkeepers would be looking at me and they'd be like wanting to kill me. They wouldn't want to serve me. They didn't want to talk to me. It was like, And I had to convince them. I was like, it's only a TV show. So that happened. This happened a lot. And later on, because of my good fighting skills, a lot of people liked me on the show, and they were writing to the producers that you should really make this guy Muslim. And I didn't think it was going to happen, but they did that. And the way they did that was quite inspirational. It was an amazing opportunity to play on that show. After that show, I started doing a few other films in Turkey, and then I ended up moving to Bosnia. I have my own TV show at the moment on in Turkey with the same channel. It's a documentary travel cultural show that we are trying to show about underprivileged families that are living all around the world, from Nepal, Pakistan, or third world countries, where they're doing like really crazy jobs. And what we do, I go and live with the family, I eat with the family, I work with the family, I sleep with the family, I sleep on the same kind of bed, or if they don't have a bed, I sleep on the concrete with them. And it shows real life. And why we do that show is because the Turkish government, or the Turkish television network, really want the Turkish people to appreciate what they have. So that's the main thing they want, and in that they want me to live with the family, because they want a tighter family structure in Turkey. Because if you have a strong family, you have a strong neighborhood, you have a strong society. So, alhamdulillah.
Just one question. What was the sort of changing factor in your life, the catalyst that brought you closer to your religion, or you went from sort of Hollywood to, we can say, Hollywood, or your Deen?
Hollywood, that's a good one.
Hollywood to Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, I grew up as a practicing Muslim. I used to go as a kid. We weren't part of the Tabligh Jamaat, but we would attend 3-day kharuj in like one place in Melbourne or Sydney or something like that. We would be, I learned so much on that. I also went to a madrasa when I was in high school for 1 year. I used to go on Muslim camps. I would say I was a proud Muslim and an educated young Muslim in Australia, being half Australian, and my identity would be like, for you guys, I guess it'd be the equivalent of half Pakistani, half English. You know what I mean? So you're confused in your identity. It's confused with my identity. And one thing that triggered that was I didn't know who I was. I had a Muslim name, Reshad. I was going to a Muslim school where I was going to a non-Muslim school. Where there was like, I was the only Muslim in my year. You feel the pressure. So you look for your identity. I looked for my identity, and I found that in Islam. And the best thing was just to focus on that. So I got into acting for that reason. I saw the film, the message. I must have seen it 1 billion times as a kid. Every day after school I'd be watching that film, and I knew every single line out of that film. I still know every single line out of that film. And that was like probably, for kids that don't read that many books, television and cinema is the easiest way to just converse with them, to teach them. And that's what it did with me. I learned a lot of things about that. So what was the question was, what was the main thing, the catalyst that triggered me back into Islam? I went to Hollywood. I didn't have one Muslim friend around me for 5 years there. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing trying to become successful so I can start doing Islamic content. It's almost impossible, you know what I mean? Because I don't have a Muslim friend around me. You are who your friends are. So I decided I needed to get out of here. And it's the thing about Hollywood, it's dunya. It's the sweetest taste of dunya. Everyone loves the dunya, you know what I mean? And I ended up going to Bosnia for Ramadan. And there was one sheikh there. I remember after Fajr, he was giving a small dars after Fajr, 5-minute dars, and he was explaining how us Muslims, we really love the dunya so much, And I was thinking about all my friends about that in Hollywood, ones that own helicopters, sons of the biggest trust fund babies in the world, you know. And he said that this sheikh said, we love the dunya so much, like a street dog that hasn't eaten for 3 days. He said, you give a bone to that dog, the dog's going to be just chewing the bone, holding onto the bone. He said, we love the dunya just like that dog loves the bone. Try to take the bone from the dog. Try to take the dunya off the people. And I started thinking about everything, the watches I'm wearing, the clothes, the cars, everything. I was just thinking, the lifestyle, man. I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to get married, bro. I got to clean myself up. I can't hang out with the people that I was hanging out with. So, you know, I just called it a spade, and I was like, that's it. I'm done. I made niyat, you know. I really need to get married as soon as possible. It didn't matter, hijab, no hijab, didn't matter. I just need a wife. Hijab, ideally hijab, because hijab is like a protection, you know. When you have a hijab, or a wife with a hijab, you cannot mix Hollywood.
You mentioned about your father who grew up in former communist Yugoslavia, and if you know the history of Yugoslavia, many Muslims were martyred there for not being allowed to freely practice their religion, and anyone who practiced their religion would be locked away and tortured as well. So first, British Muslims, and you've touched on this as well, how much is it of a blessing that we're able to freely practice our religion?
Brothers, you have it like on a golden platter. You guys are so free compared to what they had. It's quite scary that was only, 50 years ago, where, you know, if you spoke out, you will never be seen again, you know. And if you can look at now at West China, it's a similar thing, exactly the same thing as what happened in former Yugoslavia. You know, I have my father's Amur, my father's uncle, he went missing, you know, never seen again. That's one of the things that made my father and my grandmother want to migrate to Australia, to get out of it, get away from it. So they got out, they migrated to Australia. Bosnia is a phenomenal place, mashallah. It has such a rich history. It's a beautiful place. It's full of beautiful mountains, forests. There's rivers all over Bosnia. And we have a lot of alims there. Alhamdulillah, after the last war, the Bosnians woke up and started practicing, were free to practice again, and that's been such a blessing. If you guys get the chance to go to Bosnia, please come visit. Please, it's such a beautiful place. You guys living in England will be like so amazed that there's brothers and sisters out there who are hafiz, alims, and have blonde hair, blue eyes, and you know, it's like it'd be really, you guys will really learn from that. Brother Muhammad Faraz does tours there. Please, if he has a tour coming up, please come visit me as well. I'm living there. My kids go to a Turkish school there, Turkish Muslim school there.
Just moving on briefly, you've mentioned in the past about your mother, that she was a rock of your family, and how she sort of brought you back into the religion, and she made you very punctual in Islam. And this is mainly for our sisters listening at home as well. How much of an inspiration was your mother in your life?
Are the sisters listening right now?
They're listening at home, yes.
Yeah, mashallah. Okay, so my mother is everything to me. My mother and father, everything, absolutely everything. They work so hard for myself and my brothers. But my mother in particular, she is like one of a billion, because she came from a very, very affluent family. Her father was a barrister, then became a judge in Australia. He was a very well-known man. He was a very fair man, and she has 7 brothers and sisters. And she met my father, who was like a migrant. Right? He's a migrant. My father's an immigrant to Australia. not seen as someone that's kind of respectable. Although my father was very well dressed, he was like a sir, he was well dressed. But my father was a painter, a house painter. He'd go around paint houses and then he'd dress up nice and go out. She met my father, and my father didn't know much about Islam because of his background of communism. You were very limited. He knew he was a Muslim. He was ready to fight anyone because of that. He was ready. He knew Al-Fatiha. He knew Shahada. That's basically it. He didn't know anything else. That's the limited amount of knowledge that these people were allowed. So my mother, after they got married, my mother wanted to take my brothers to like some sort of religion, to Catholicism, to a Catholic church, to Sunday school. And my father was like, no way. He was like, not happening. And basically what happened was my mother said, okay, then she started to research other religions. And all the answers, she went to a boarding school, a Catholic boarding school, so all the answers that she had that were unanswered, all the questions she had unanswered, she found in the Quran. She was reading the Quran, it became such a light thing for her, like just a nur, and just so beautiful for her. And she started taking the kids to madrasa in Canberra, in the capital, Australia's capital. And eventually she wanted to become Muslim, and my father didn't know how to take it because he's never seen anyone become Muslim before. So he was like I don't know what to do. It's like, and my mother took Shahada, and she was like, she started going to madrasa as well, and she started practicing. And my mother would come home and teach my father what she learned, and she would push him to go to the masjid. She was always pushing him. She was telling him, this is your religion. You need to do this. And he needed that. He needed that push. And then he was like, that's it. Once he started, he was in love with it. He stopped all the bad things he was doing, and he just started going fajr. It started more and more. And they had a beautiful life, mashallah. My mother and father, they had a really mixed community in Australia, so it's really good. We got these people from Malaysia, because that's our neighbour there, Indonesia, Malaysia. You have all these Indians, Pakistanis, everything. You have whatever you want, Turks, all the Arabs. So it's Africans. It's such a beautiful mix.
Me and my wife, we love our coffee. And
he does love coffee.
We're hooked on Ertugrul, Eritrean organic coffee. And there's a lot of history behind coffee as well. The Muslims invented coffee as well, and in the Haramain it was forbidden for so many years. It was declared haram because it was declared that it was an intoxicant. Then afterwards it sort of became halal. Do you still have your coffee shop?
So I have a cafe, I have a couple of cafes, and I have a coffee roasters in Bosnia, and I import coffee, and I give classes on coffee, and I train baristas, and that's just like a passionate thing for me. I don't make money on that. I just love it, and I love coffee. I love trying different coffees. I love the history of coffee, because the history of coffee actually, if you look at the Muslim countries, all the Muslim countries will testify that coffee originated from Yemen. Yeah. All right, one of the Harazi mountains or something like that. They say it comes from Yemen, and there are trees in Yemen that have been there for like thousands of years. They just say that's like a 1,000-year-old tree, coffee tree, and the best kind of coffee. There's 4 types of coffee. There's one I don't know the name of. It's like no one drinks it. There's Liberica that originates from Liberia. There's Robusta that originates from, it's not Uganda, but it's maybe something like that. And it's a weed, Robusta, because it's robust. It's a weed. It has double the caffeine. It's probably what most of the cheaper cafes serve. And there's Arabica, which originates from Arabia. And if you Google where does Arabica come from, you're going to have about 30 pages on Google saying that it comes from Ethiopia. But it doesn't really come from Ethiopia, because the people in Yemen were cultivating it 200 years before it was even discovered in Ethiopia. So that's a bit of like propaganda there from the West that they're just trying to take away from the Muslims. And I think that's quite interesting. I think it's really interesting. And the best coffee in the world, the best Arabica in the world, is Yemeni. The most expensive Arabica in the world is Yemeni. Let's change it.
Sheikh, I have a question.
Sorry. Young boys and girls who are doing media study at college, and they are thinking of going to university, and obviously in the third university they have to choose the option, either do journalism or go into film industry or do documentary. I mean, what is lacking for Muslims, or what would you advise these young people?
Sheikh, I think it's all lacking. Like the entire, I mean, we need journalists to write about our Muslim films, to write about our Muslim actors, right? We need it all. We need the whole package. We don't have that though. Unfortunately, we just don't have that. It can't be like a one-man show. I have no idea how Mustafa Akkad did it all by himself. You know, the message, the line in the desert. I don't know how he did all that by himself. He got distribution all over the world, and unfortunately, I mean that's where the ball dropped after that film, after those films. There wasn't anything that really was good enough to write home about to after that, in terms of Islamic content.
But you're also saying that, okay, for a young person, they want to university now,
Okay.
and they've chosen an option, like other journalism, going to make a documentary and so forth. But because sometimes in the UK, they might not find people who can support them, like you, let's say, you found. So what would you say, to go to a Muslim country and try and liaise with people?
Okay, I would say if you have to go to a Muslim country, go to a Muslim country. But you also have enough population here. I mean, looking at the results of Ertugrul, the TV show, I mean, there's proof that there's a market for it. So I think we just need to create more content, and I think that's what's really lacking, is creating the content, creating the what I would say like think tanks, you know, throwing the ideas up. I think like real lessons, like training, we lack that. And I think we also, above all, we lack mentorship. Mentorship is one of the most important things, because without a guide, you're not going to get there, you know. No offense to imams or anything, I don't really believe an imam is going to be able to guide an actor, like tell them what to do and all that. Maybe they can, but maybe if they're really in touch with what's going on, and then I think that's of great benefit, because you can't do it alone. I mean, I couldn't do it alone. I needed a mentor, and majority of my mentors were non-Muslims. You know, it's like to get through university. You know, they tell you at university you need a mentor. You know, so like a guide.
So you could be an open market to Muslims from UK, young boys and girls, as a mentor.
Inshallah, you know, I'd like to add to that. I think you should actually encourage your youth to get into to films, cinema, acting. I think you need to encourage them. I know it's dangerous, but you need to encourage them as long as it's Islamic. You know, you got to keep it Islamic. Keep their values, keep their morals.